Disclaimer: the views expressed on this episode of Perspective Platoon with Prateek are solely the opinions of the host and the guest. The content of the conversation is not reflective of the institutions or establishments mentioned therein. Take all these opinions with a pinch of salt and a dash of lime if needed. Namaskara, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you're watching or listening, and welcome to this episode of Perspective Platoon with Prateek. My guest this week is Marc Adrian. Marc and I, like most of my guests, met each other at the University of Central Oklahoma through some of the campus activities that we were involved in together. In this episode, we cover a wide range of topics associated with what Marc is doing today, a lot of which is modeling and through photo shoots and representing his culture through it. Speaking of which, we also dig into topics like culture and representation and so much more. And I'm certain that there's quite a bit of nuance in this conversation that you can get an idea for as to how many perspectives there are out there with regards to topics like representation and much more. So make sure to check this episode out and give it a keen listen. So without further ado, I present to you Marc Adrian on this episode of Perspective Platoon with Prateek. Hey Marc, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for
Good.
joining me. Once again, I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Absolutely.
Before we get started, if you could let everybody know who's listening and watching who you are, what you do, your likes, dislikes, future aspirations, anything and everything you're willing to share.
Okay. Actually, I realized that when I first moved to the US, I introduced myself as Marc. And then
Uh-huh.
eventually down the road, I realized that the only people that call me Marc are my grandma when she's mad and my dad when he's mad. Because
Gotcha.
people in the Philippines typically refer to me as Mackie, like California Mackie, Like that's that's my nickname growing up. So all my friends, everyone knows me as Mackie. And so I've kind of now made it a habit to also introduce myself as that. But everyone asks me here, what do I call you? Do you want me to call you Mackie? I'm like, I'm fine with either one. I just forget to
Right.
introduce myself as that. But yeah,
Right.
I'm Marc or Mackie, whatever you prefer. I'm comfortable with both. Likes and dislikes. I have way too many to mention. Like way too many
That's
to
fine.
mention.
That's fine.
But big on music for sure. Big on art. Culture. I mean, from a Southeast Asian background, it's kind of always anything involving arts, anything involving culture, especially when I moved here, it kind of amplified that. I also have many things I dislike. I dislike Oklahoma weather.
Fair. I'm with you on that.
But I'm managing. But I guess that's like it's a rabbit hole from there. Kind of find out as we speak, I'm sure. But yeah, I'm from the Philippines. I moved here in 2016, and I have been in Oklahoma since then. I moved here on the 4th of July. I always make it a point to say that because it sounds important to say that I moved here on the 4th of July.
America.
Exactly. But yeah.
Right. Cool. What was it like moving on the 4th of July? Did you see a lot of stuff happening that day?
Oh yeah. When I moved here, I landed in LA from Manila at around like 6 or 7 p.m. And then
okay.
Yeah, and then a relative. It's so funny because I moved to the US and I didn't have this phone. Like I had just like my phone just got like destroyed or something. And so I didn't have time to get a new phone while I was in the Philippines. And so do you remember the keypad phones?
Mm-hmm.
I had one of those phones when I this was 2016. This is a modern day. And so I was in LA like with that phone. I could still text people. And then I just remember being in LA going through the airport because someone was supposed to pick me up and I didn't even know who. And then I
Right.
was going through the airport and then I saw like my aunt who was supposed to pick me up. And I was like, thank God. But yeah, I was in LA going around looking for tacos, I guess, with my aunt. And then she brought me back to the airport at around like 10:30 because I had a flight back to Oklahoma shortly after. And so yeah, that was my 4th of July. I was like seeing fireworks in LA, but like that was my first ever 4th of July experience, really.
Gotcha. I mean, that's still interesting enough because you're like walking in and there's fireworks and you're like, what is
Oh, I
happening?
know. I was
So
like, this is a very grand welcome to America.
right, exactly. America welcomes you.
I
Yeah.
know. That's so
But what
true.
was it like carrying a flip phone around at that time? Did it feel, oh, not a flip phone, excuse me, like a keypad phone?
Oh
Was it
my
more of
God.
it eking you out, or were you sort of,
It was
I don't know,
more
maybe did
so
you
like
feel,
me
yeah,
being
go ahead.
nervous about like
Mm,
going to a different country without a like an immediate means of communication. It felt so archaic. I was like, what the heck is going on? You know? Like I'm going through
right.
the airport deciding whether I should get a phone at the airport because you know how you can just
Mm,
get a phone on the at the airport. And I was like, I know how to access all of this. Like I had my computer with me too. So like I don't know. I managed. Like I know exactly what to do in situations like this. Luckily.
hmm.
But yeah, nerve wracking for sure. I think it's just like going from one country to another.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm just glad I went to a different country that like I didn't have a language barrier with, so that was pretty easy.
Right, exactly. Because I think that factors in a lot, right?
Oh,
Especially
completely.
if it makes it harder for you to communicate with the people that you're going to be around. It
Yeah,
definitely comes with its own set of challenges, which, I mean, has its pros and cons, I guess. You get to learn something, but at the same time, you feel like you're struggling for a moment.
yeah.
But what was just moving from Manila to a place like Oklahoma like?
hmm Oh, so I'm actually from a city called Iloilo City.
Okay.
It is referred to as the heart of the Philippines or the city of love in the Philippines. And it was not much of a culture shock, quite frankly, because of how I grew up and because of where I grew up. Um, Manila is Manila is a capital city, and I whenever I would go there, it is so busy. It's very urban, so it felt like it really didn't feel like anything new necessarily,
Mm,
but moving to the US and moving to Oklahoma kind of shows me like because I guess when you move from so there's to clarify there's like there's a conservative America and there's like conservative Asia.
hmm.
And when I say conservative Asia, it's more so like the length of the shorts that you wear or the amount
Right.
of skin you expose, things of that nature, you know? Um, and so it's like remembering that and moving here, oftentimes, the elders in the Philippines or people in the Philippines will refer to people who move to the US as like liberated, if that makes sense.
Mm,
And I never understood that because I always observed the people that moved from my country to the US and then would come back to visit. And I was like, what do you mean by liberated? Like, what does that mean? And then I understood because um, it's like when you move to the US, it's like there aren't the same rules. The rules are so different. It's like there are no rules,
right.
you know? So it's like, liberated in a sense where there is a sense of like freedom to first of all voice your opinion, to wear whatever you want, to do whatever you want as long as it's well within the means of like doing good, whatever good might be. And so that's really what validated it for me, I guess. Like I didn't have a culture shock in terms of like, oh, this is how people are. I really wasn't like I kind of got it. More than anything, I always tell this to people. The thing that really like shocked me was like serving sizes. Serving sizes are crazy in America.
Yeah.
Like an extra large or like a large in the US is like an extra large in my country. And so
Right.
like that was the most shocking thing to me. It was kind of jarring. I was like, this is crazy. But yeah, that's really it though.
No, that's a fair observation to make because I think we're so used to these smaller portion sizes back
Yeah.
home, even in India for that matter. And so when you move here, everything is just so big.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it definitely sort of seems out of place, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, especially since you're used to something very different. But
Yeah.
you made an interesting point about not necessarily feeling that sense of culture shock. So
Yeah.
it's just a question that popped up in my head. And I was just wondering, like, do you think that we'll experience culture shock anymore because of how connected we are as a world?
Wait, do you are you could you repeat that? Like do you think
Yeah,
I
yeah, for
didn't
sure.
feel the culture shock because of that connection?
No, like, so what I mean is, because we're so connected now as people, even though
Mhm.
you're like in the Philippines or in India or in the US, do you think that culture shock will not necessarily be a thing in the future?
I think it's different. I think it's different for people depending on where you are, depending on where you're
Right.
coming from. I feel as though, and I'm not saying this as a general statement, I feel as though people in America, if they were to go to Asia, I feel like to them, that culture is so extreme, which
Hmm.
I will agree. Like, if you went to my country, it is so different from the culture that is here. Like, people always have like reservations about other people's culture, especially when they're from America, which brings a whole different topic of like, it's like, yeah, that's the way cultures are. I mean, it's
Right.
never culture should never be an excuse for poor behavior.
Yeah.
Period. However, there are practices in different cultures that I feel like would definitely shock other people, whether it's in a good or
Hmm.
a bad way. I think culture shock will always be there, but I think it depends on where you're from. I think
Right.
coming from you and I, like India and the Philippines are very tech savvy countries. Very. Like we are the countries in Southeast Asia that have um that are known to be the most like tech involved or like social media
Hmm.
specifically involved countries. And so I think that blurs the lines with cultures. But inherently, America really doesn't shock me
Mm.
culturally. It's like I kind of already know what it is because of pop culture and American media. There are other things that shock me, but I wouldn't say that it's necessarily the culture, or I wouldn't hope it would be.
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting point because I think a lot of the times we are exposed to American culture, but America is not exposed to the culture of the world.
no.
So, it's sort of that difference in, okay, for us it's sort of like, oh, we've sort of seen this. Sure, there are still going to be some differences. Not every city in the US is like New York City or Los Angeles for
Yeah.
that matter. There's differences that are going to be there, but inherently you're gonna know that some things because of your exposure through pop culture and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure, that's an interesting point. Because I definitely feel like if any part of Southeast, no, maybe just not any part of Southeast Asia, but wherever, if somebody used to go out from America or from Europe, a lot of places would feel like a sensory overload to them,
Yeah.
but this doesn't
Oh,
necessarily feel like a
completely.
sensory overload for us.
No, because it's like our cultures are so much louder.
Hmm.
Um, like so much louder. And in a lot of ways too. Again, it's like We often joke about Asian stereotypes, and we joke about them because a lot of them are real, you know?
Right.
Like a lot of them, like the caricatures of Asian culture, when especially when portrayed by Asian people, um, like it's literally art imitating real life. That's exactly what our cultures are. Um, and there's no like, especially when we talk about a very prevalent or a very prominent like similarity with a lot of cultures, whether it's Southeast Asian or African, specifically Southeast Asian and African. Actually, it's the one auntie. Do you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Like, there's
Hmm.
always the one auntie. Like, that is an inherent similarity that many cultures share. Whereas in the United States, it's like a very subdued, like suburban, like that's kind of the culture, if that makes sense. Or not necessarily culture, but like an image of the culture. And so even in like those micro scenarios, like the caricatures are like that's reality. Like it makes sense.
Yeah. 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 Sure. Because I remember somebody saying this. I think it was one of the previous recordings that I had. That not all stereotypes are bad necessarily.
Hmm.
Sure, there are some that are sort of taken out of context and like made to be bad or whatever, if you will.
Oh
But
yeah,
generally speaking,
completely.
yeah, generally speaking, stereotypes are mostly just a representation of who we are as people from that part
Yeah.
of the world. Yeah.
Which is
And
why it's like
speaking of
whenever
stereotypes, oh, go ahead.
yeah, oh, I was just gonna mention that like it's the same way like whenever we had gatherings in college involving the international community, it's like it doesn't feel, for me at least, it never really felt like anything new because again, we've seen like whenever a different country presents their culture, it's their version of kind of what we've experienced in terms of like, again, like to other people, it might be sensory overload. To us, it's like, yeah, this makes sense.
Yeah, 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 for sure, for sure. Um, this probably is going to be a very loaded question, so I'm going to
Hmm.
break it down slightly. But
No, go
um,
ahead.
yeah, so you mentioned stereotypes, and a major stereotype that the outside world has about Asians is the fact that we're very studious, we're nerdy, uh, head towards tech jobs, and so on and so
Hmm.
forth. But this is more of an outsider's observation, so please correct me if I'm wrong.
Hmm.
What I have observed, especially from like a country like Philippines, is that there's a very inherent sort of, for the lack of a better word, expression of art and culture that,
Hmm.
not to say that other countries don't have,
Yeah.
but they do. But like with the Philippines, for example, like almost every, well, I guess that's generalizing it a little too much, but
No,
almost
you're
every
fine. You're
person who's
fine.
Filipino can sing really well or something like that. I know
Yeah.
that's a really bad
No,
generalization, I
that's not
guess,
even a
but
stereotype. That's like, oh. But no,
right.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what is it about the Philippines that makes it different in that sense?
Well, first of all, to respond to that stereotype, it's really not a stereotype. It's like real. Like it's funny because
Gotcha.
I will often joke about no, dude, I don't even joke about it. Like I'm dead serious when I say that like karaoke in the Philippines is a competition. It is
Mm,
not. Like people have always had like nice things to say about whenever I sing. And I've been singing since I was little. Um, but it is so hard. When I say it's so hard, it is so hard to impress the Filipino audience. It's crazy because again, it's like you turn the corner and it's like someone's like doing karaoke like at a neighborhood somewhere and they're seeing like Whitney Houston just on a like on a Tuesday night. Like what the
right.
heck? And so it's like very common. It's really like I don't know. You'll just like if you went to the Philippines, you will hear it, you will see it. It just happens.
Right.
And I think the reason why Filipinos or the Philippines is a very creative culture Um, I think it's because of, like, if you think about history, we have always just been a vibrant, colorful culture. And, like, I feel as though in a lot of different ways, like music, the arts in whatever form is our way of connecting to our culture post colonization. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? It's
Mm-hmm.
like it really connects us to our roots, even without deliberately, even without that being the deliberate like reason why we pursue art or we do art. But I also want to mention that much as Filipinos are known to be a creative culture or a creative people, um, there also isn't always, it also isn't like something that's celebrated as a career.
Mm.
And I don't know if it's an Asian thing because again, like you know how we talked about, or you know how you mentioned earlier that like Asians always have the stereotype of being studious or being in tech jobs and things of that nature. I agree, which I think is why like people don't see the merits of um, creating or having a career in the arts. Like they
Mm-hmm.
see it more as like a pastime or a hobby more than a career, which I think is a problem because if you fund or if you continue to support people in the art or people in the arts, there is such a there is such an opportunity to flourish there, you know? Because again, like in Southeast Asian cultures, creativity and it's not even just bought creativity. It's like resourceful creativity. Like you can make anything literally from scrap, you know, and it will not look like scrap at all. And it's like making things out of things that are available to you. I think it speaks widely of um quite frankly issues on poverty in Southeast Asia and the things that people do to cope with all of these things, to cope with you know daily like life struggles or their life situation. And so it's like just a means to express their own creativity. And I think that's kind of like inherent in our cultures, whether, sorry, in whatever financial class you might be. You know, it doesn't have to be in any financial class. That's just kind of how it is.
Right. Right. Because yeah, as you were talking, I had this sort of thought about, and you sort of mentioned it in terms of, well, again, this is probably a little loaded again, like, but in terms of, even though, at least from the outside perspective, you all seem quite creative as a culture, there is still that sort of, again, for the lack of a better word, a boundary, if you will, to where
Yeah.
they don't necessarily see it as a choice, a career choice, but just see it as a way of expression rather than a way
Yeah.
someone can make money out of it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that probably goes back to the fact that a lot of these places have problems like poverty, and
Mm-hmm.
these generations of the past have only seen tech jobs or like become medical careers make the money, whereas
Yeah.
creative jobs not necessarily making as much money. But I think that's
Right.
changed now. The dynamic has changed in a lot of ways because even creative fields are making the money that doctors are making, probably, and
And
they're
I
probably
think
not
it's
hating their job.
also, yeah, exactly. And I think it's also like a generational difference.
Right.
Um, I think the current generation, like our generation, we are so loud and so bent on doing what we think is best for us instead of what, you know, it's like we are so lucky to have, especially to be in the United States and to have opportunities to work outside of our careers. I often say that being in the US, um, and people don't really realize that this is what the US gives you. like tying this back to the whole liberated situation,
Mm-hmm.
people don't realize that what the US gives you is quite literally the freedom to express who you are and the freedom to explore what you might be able to bring to the table. Um, and as a person that comes from a culture that is so that can be very restrictive, um, moving to the US kind of like really opens my eyes to like the idea that there is no ceiling. There is really no limitation to what you might be able to achieve. And if there is a limitation, it might be a skill set, but that isn't something you can't learn,
Right.
you know? And so, yeah, I think it's such a generational difference too. Again, like in whatever career you pursue, obviously you have to be passionate about it enough to pursue it for a prolonged period of time. Um, but I'm just happy to see our generation be loud about, like, no, I will make money. Like, money is not the primary driving force anymore. Like, I will, like, if you are in a like financial situation where it's difficult, it's like, yeah, I know it's difficult now, but um it does, like, the end does not justify the means, is what I'm saying, you know?
Definitely, definitely. Because I mean, it's a cliche, but money can't buy happiness, right? That's like a statement that everybody makes. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, sure, to some extent, but like more, maybe from a more material sense, if you will, but not necessarily from a more
Like satisfying, like,
right. It's not like actually gratifying or yeah, satisfying in a lot of
yeah,
ways for you as a person internally. Because yeah, I mean,
completely.
what's the point of doing something? Well, you do have to do things that you probably don't like at
Yeah.
times. I'm a personal believer of that, but
Yeah.
um, eventually you can find your way to do something that you genuinely love doing.
Yeah. And even sometimes when you're doing things that you enjoy doing, it's like for example, when I was first really discovering what music was for me in the Philippines, like I like competed in like a variety of singing competitions, and it went from something that I just enjoyed as a pastime or discovered as a kid that I could do to be actually being passionate about competing. Like I love competing, not for the sake of beating someone else, but just the idea of competition is so much fun to me. Um, but it's basically like, I don't know. I don't know. It's like whenever I don't want to call it suffering, but it's like difficulty in whatever field is a given. Like you'll experience it. There's burnout. Like you can enjoy whatever you're doing, but you hit a point, you hit a wall, you hit a wall where it's like, I kind of don't want to do this for a little bit, you know? And it stifles your creativity if you keep on doing it, if you keep on forcing yourself to do something when there's really like no passion or inspiration there. Like if you're just doing it to do it in whatever you're doing, it's like you can tell with the work that's produced, you know?
Mm-hmm. For sure, for sure. I think you can. Again, this maybe sounds a little more cliche, but you can tell when it's not coming from the heart, if you will, if I
Oh,
was to put it that way.
completely.
Yeah.
Completely. It's like it's like me volunteering to sing versus my grandmother volunteering me to sing. Those are two very
Right.
different things.
Right. 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 Exactly. Exactly. You don't
So,
want. Well, you just to sort of take that example. You don't want your grandma to sort of go and tell somebody, be like, "Hey, you have this thing going on, right? Sure, my grandson can
yeah.
sing for you." And then you're like,
Right.
"What? Why me?"
That
Yeah.
has happened many times.
Right. Right. I think that happens a lot in Asian cultures, but
I know. But yeah.
yeah. I guess it's just a byproduct of this sort of community based living that exists there.
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, because I think, not to say that community doesn't exist here, it definitely does, but it's very different because there is a level, or there is a line drawn in terms of, okay, keep your personal space, I will keep my space. Whereas
Yeah.
back home, it's sort of like, yeah, we're all up in each other's space.
Oh, completely. Though I will say too, I mean, with a younger generation, there is, I really like the idea of maintaining personal spaces, even in the sense of a
Hmm.
community, because again, there's only so much that you are willing or emotionally able to give in any
Right.
situation. Um, but at the same time, it's like whenever you find an advocate here, it's a very like substantial advocate, you know? Like you see it in movements involving like Black Lives Matter or you know, like protecting Asian lives and things of that nature. Um, like it's very prevalent. Like whenever it's a sense of community, I think I just sometimes it's obviously it's ideal. It's so ideal to say that like I wish we were brought together by better circumstances. That's always the ideal scenario, but you know, when you're brought together by something that's difficult, it kind of strengthens the idea of community in the US. Um, which again, it's just sad that it's like a community is brought together by a difficulty, though it's never mutually exclusive. And I will agree. It's like in Asian cultures, it's like we are really all up in each other's business back home. That is so true.
Right, right, right. Yeah, like if you're even seeing someone, I mean, this maybe not as much in
Oh
the
my
new
gosh.
generation, I guess, but like back in the day, even if you're seeing someone, the
Yep.
person who lives across the street will probably know. It's that sort of thing.
Yep.
It's that sort of thing.
Oh
Do
my
you do
gosh.
you, do you feel like you miss that?
No. I I oh my gosh. If anyone in the okay. This is in no way oversharing because I really don't care. If anyone is the older Filipino, I want them to hear this.
Okay.
If anyone in the older like generation of the Filipinos were to ever come across this, pay attention. Because it's like sometimes it can be very tactless. Very
Mm,
tactless, I tell you. Like again, I feel as though in the younger generation, they're um again, we're very vocal about boundaries, especially with those that have moved to the US, right? But I've noticed with the older generation, whether you move to the US or you stay in the Philippines, there's no sense of boundaries.
mhm,
It's like whenever I see someone from the Philippines, whether I go home or when I'm here, like it or this is one of my biggest pet peeves. When you see me or anyone, any Filipino, and you go, "Oh hey, how are you? Are you fat? Did you get fat?" Like what is that? I do not understand that. It's like, you are so bold to ask me this question right now. I'm like, I don't know. Are you? I just don't understand that. There's just no sense of like, it's just tactlessness, really.
mm.
I don't understand that. But yeah, I don't miss it. And it still happens.
Right, 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 right.
But yeah.
Yeah, I think the reason why it maybe feels a little hurtful in a lot of ways is also probably because it's not like the first thing they're telling you when they see you.
I know.
Yeah, which sort of makes it a little upsetting in a lot of ways because it's not like you've had a conversation about, okay, everything is going great or not so great. This is how things are. It's not like you sort of had a conversation and sort of opened up a space to the conversation. It's just sort of like
Yeah.
a dart being thrown at you. Hey, there you go. Sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
I'm like,
So I feel
so
like
much
that's
has
what
happened
makes
in
it
my
hurtful.
life. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, that's exactly what I mean. Like that. what you said, like, perfectly describes that. I did not open a space for that conversation. So why are we talking about it? Not that
Mm.
I am incapable of having that conversation, but if that
Right.
is the only thing, if that's the first thing you talk to me about, like, really? That's like the most you could conjure in this. And it's so funny too, because it's like, I'm not insecure about that at all. It just annoys the living hell out of me. It's funny
Right.
because it's like, at one point, I had lost so much weight, but I had not seen like these people at all. And this happened in the US. And that was the first thing they said. Like, they even like patted me down. Not like that, but they were like, they gave me a
Yeah.
hug and felt it. You know what I mean? And I was like, what is this? Like,
Hmm.
but yeah, again, that is a caricature of Filipino culture that is so real. Like, it's not even a caricature, it's real.
Right. 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 Yeah, for sure. And sort of going back to that, since you sort of mentioned it, going back to culture and like sort of our upbringings as people. I mean, from what I've seen of you, you're a very creative person, like be it through your photo shoots or singing and all that sort of stuff. So, how much of it was culture? I mean, you probably can't boil it down to okay, 50% this, 50% that, but
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
how much of it do you think had to do with your upbringing?
um, so uh I've thought about that a lot actually. So recently, well, not fairly recently. This happened in January. So I did a shoot with actually a friend I met. Like, I saw his work from another friend in college, um, and I was just so enthralled by his work. His work is incredible. His name is sorry, the photographer that I'm referring to. His name is Logan Miller. He's based in
Hmm.
Tulsa, and I saw his work over lockdown of last year. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, this is so good. This is so good. And I really wanted to work with him. And we had worked together, um, I think around summer of last year, around that time when everything kind of like simmered down and we were okay to leave our homes. Um, when Well, going back in January, I worked with him on a project that ended up in a magazine, which was like, to me, still to this day, like, I'm like, I cannot believe that this happened. But the inspiration for that shoot was the inspiration for that shoot was the first ever Asian Hollywood actress. Her name is Anna May Wong. This was like black and white films. And just to give you a little bit of background, Anna May Wong was typecast as one specific character. She was the Asian Dragon Lady. And when I say Asian Dragon Lady, Asians more than anyone know exactly what that looks like, whether it's in a film or in real life. I feel like that can easily be like someone's grandma, you know what I mean? But at the same time, she only fit that one role. She was never given a romantic lead. She was never given roles that were like Audrey Hepburn type roles. And so the inspiration for the shoot was reimagining old Hollywood imagery with an Asian male protagonist. And then that's when I realized that a lot of the work that I do now, especially, is so tied to my culture, especially when I'm given a platform to put Asian culture on the spotlight, not
Hmm.
for my own benefit, but for the benefit of representation. Like, I am just another image of like Asian culture. Like, it's not about me as me, but it's like if this is going to be in a magazine and I can talk about this issue and I can talk about um, misrepresentation of Asian culture and Asian people from the 20s in media all the way to now, I will happily take that opportunity, you know? And so I've just noticed that in my creativity, I always want there to be some form of Asian influence. Um, because of two things. One being uh my just intention for representation. Like I want that imagery there. I want that to be part of my brand, whether I'm deliberately trying to present a brand. Like even when I apply at jobs, even when I, you know, even when I in my resume, it is so obvious that like I am from an Asian culture and you will know that I am from an Asian culture, but it won't be super loud. You will just know. And second, because I feel as though the younger generation that's in the United States that has never been to Asia, that has never been to their home countries, kind of blurs the lines um, between our culture and what they understand of our culture.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's also kind of like in the, I don't know, kind of like in the Philippines. And tell me if this is similar to you too, like in India. But whenever you're in the Philippines, there's always the desire to be part of or to do something that the US is doing or to do something that the Americans are doing because, like, that's the thing to do. You know what I mean? Whereas to me, I think being Asian is cool. You
Right.
know, like you will see me in like, sure, I'm wearing a denim jacket right now, but it's like when I was at UCO, like I wore this like Asian like patchwork jacket that I just loved wearing because it was so loud and obviously Asian that you couldn't miss it.
Right.
And so it's
And
like, you
oh, go
know,
ahead.
no, that was just it. Like in the Philippines, it's like we are so quick to praise like, oh yeah, this is like the thing because it's the thing in America. I'm like, no, it's the thing because it kind of started here or started in a different culture and made its way to America somehow, you know.
Right. Yeah. No, I definitely agree because I think part of it also, I'm no
Mhm.
psychologist, but part of it also I feel is the inherent need of us feeling the need to fit in.
Mhm.
We always want to feel that sense of, okay, I fit into this group of people, or I fit into this culture,
Mhm.
or, I'm hip, as the kids would say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or whatever, So all of those things, I think, sort of have a role to play in that sort of, what's the word to use there, in terms of like latching on to the newest trend that you see
Yeah.
happening
Yeah.
over here. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, well, you said something really interesting and really important about how you just feel best to represent who you are and what your culture is to you.
Yeah.
So, from that, how important do you think representation is?
Oh, so very important. So very important. Like, for example, my version of business casual, whenever someone mentions a function that involves anything business casual, my version of it, business casual, I've made it a point that my version of business casual or formal is different. Um, I want my version of business casual or formal to have, or to be like my traditional. So the the national attire. I don't want to call it a costume. The national attire in the Philippines for men. Um, well, anyone can wear it, is what I'm saying. But
Got it.
like primarily for men, is called a barong. A barong is made out of fabric that is made from woven pineapple fibers. So it is literally super like fragile. Um, and it is typically worn in like by like it like in government settings or whenever there's a specific like historical celebration or things of that nature, but it's also worn in formal events. And so I've kind of made it a point to always have that in my wardrobe, which I do, um and to kind of find a way to wear it in like my day to day, like if I just feel like wearing it, I'll wear it. um Representation is so important when it comes to the conversation of like being in America. It is so incredibly important because representation is a means of educating people. Um, I am always open to having difficult conversations involving really anything, but pertaining to Asian cultures, the only way to, much as again, throughout this conversation, you and I have talked about how stereotypes are so real. Like they're not, to us, they're not stereotypes. It's our reality. And we like, throw fun at our realities, at our own versions of realities. But um, representation is so important to help people that don't understand what our cultures are like. Um, it helps them understand, and it educates them on like what our cultures really are and like what is disrespectful and what is like you know giving honor. I guess I say honor, but it's like there's a way to appreciate a culture and there's a way to um fully change its imagery and call it your own, you know I can't even put to words how important representation is. It's like it varies in a lot of different ways. I know when I walk into a room, like it is so obvious when I walk into a room and I'm the only Asian there. Like it, you can't not tell me. Like I am the only Asian there. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Right.
And
Right. Right.
so I feel like because of the plethora of racial issues in America, I feel the need to be even more competent than the next person that walks in. Like, I carry that burden because I feel as though, like, it's if I'm the only Asian in the room, I better do a damn good job. And I will do a damn good job. Again, because of how we are portrayed or people's assumptions of what our cultures are like without even having experienced it. It's different when you're in the Philippines. It's different when you're in Asia because, dude, it's hard.
Yeah.
Everyone there is so good too. So it's
Mhm.
like you're always constantly trying to one up each other.
Right.
Whereas here, there are issues that come with um I can't even like I don't even know how to explain this, but it's like I just carry that burden is what I'm saying. It's like
Hmm.
I walk into the room, if I'm the only Asian there, I feel the need to be even better than I know I could be because I
Mm.
represent that culture. I represent that people too.
Yeah. 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 No, I get that. I get that. Um, Couple of questions. Firstly, do you feel like that burden, or have you ever felt through this journey um, that burden can reach its breaking point? And second of all, would are there any, or well, sure, I guess if we talk a little more, there probably are, but what do you think are some pitfalls of the aspect of representation? So yeah, I guess it's kind of loaded too,
Um
but whichever one you
oh
want to
no,
tackle
no, I
first.
get it. Yes, there is a breaking point, for sure. There's a ceiling. I mean, uh, oftentimes in Asian culture, um, there's not much different now for sure. But the conversation of mental health, uh, involving, um, I guess, how competitive Asians are, like not with other people, but just that's just Asians. Like Asians can be very competitive. Um, and that also comes with a familiar conversation of like family pressure. Like that's why we're competitive, because I think our families expect so much from us, or we have definitely been conditioned to, um, you know, do better in hopes of like achieving something like grand in life. Um, but there is a breaking point. For me personally, you will see that breaking point whenever I start to pull back, whenever like whenever I am not as visible as I would like to be. Um, and I have my ways of like it's an Irish exit, Loki.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll just disappear in the background, you won't notice, and then you'll be like, "Where'd Mark go?" Like I value my mental health very much. Um, Now more than ever, it affects my creativity. It affects my ability to do things, which is like a conversation that needs to be had with every field, like with people in all walks of life. Like your mental health and your uh like burnout is so real, is what I'm saying. And so that's like kind of my tipping point. Like whenever I'm not performing as well as I know I could be, that's when it's like I know it affects me. um the pitfalls I feel of representation, that is a loaded question, because it's like I really have to think about it. um I don't know, what would you say would be the pitfalls of of representation, if any?
I think it's maybe not a direct pitfall, but I think it's more so maybe an advantage that some people might take. So let's put it this way. I mean, or to sort of use this as an example, since we've mentioned Hollywood already, sort of going back to casting or making movies and so on and so forth, right? A lot of the times, because of the world that we're in right now, there can be this, what's the word I'm looking for? There can be this sort of, for the lack of a better word, thing that people sort of set with like these endeavors where they're like, okay, we need to have one Asian person to show that there is
Oh
representation,
yeah, okay.
or
Oh
we
yeah,
need to
I
sort
see
of do
exactly what you mean.
right, we need to sort of do this to make sure that that is happening, or
Yeah.
we're doing this to make sure that African Americans and so on and so forth are sort of, you're sort of giving them the light, which is not bad, but I guess it's more of an internal question that these people in these positions need to ask themselves, in the sense that, are you doing this genuinely for the sake of giving these people
Representation.
a platform, or are you
Yes.
doing this because this is bringing you the money that you need to keep this thing going? Because at the end
That
of the day, sure, money is important for a lot of these things, but it's also the intention, right? So it's sort of maybe an intention based question, but I definitely, like, personally, I see that as more of a pitfall. Because, for example, hire somebody for a job not because they're Asian, but because they're the best of the bunch that you interviewed.
right. I agree.
It's that sort
I
of thing.
agree. Um I completely agree. Like that response just lit so many like bulbs. But
Yeah.
I agree completely. There is, whether again in all forms of representation, um the pitfall of representation can be the idea that so many people in those positions consider representation as a trend as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to it being an inherent issue. Um, and like the first thing that came to mind whenever you were telling me all of that was capitalism,
Right.
and how people capitalize on issues, which sure gives people a platform, but it is so seasonal. Whereas issues involving the things that we talk about to us are day to day, like regular, like these are things that just happen in our lives. These are things that we deal with on a regular basis. This isn't something that's going to last from 2020 to 2021, which last year's like Black Lives Matter protests really brought that to light. The idea that in America, social issues can become such a trend, pride even, like the LGBTQ community often makes jokes about how large companies are so quick. It's like the analogy is a logo change. Whenever
Mm-hmm.
a company changes their logo to fit a movement, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's LGBTQ, they treat it as if it's a holiday, as if it's something
Right.
like, how like there's a Christmas logo for like different like companies? It's like that. Whereas
Right.
to us, it's like if you have, to me, it's giving back to communities where you get inspiration from. If you are a creator who is not part of that culture, be sure you give your audience links back to that culture or back to the creator that you get inspiration from. Like in college, we are so taught, like, my God, we have like checks for plagiarism. And
Yeah.
like, we're required to have a page for references usually. So treat it the same way. Like, whenever you it's, I think, and many people might argue, and I'm really not going to say that they're wrong, but it's like many people will say that like there are issues with capitalism for sure. Like in any system, there are
Mm-hmm.
issues. But whenever you capitalize on someone else's culture as a means to give them the spotlight, like a lot of reparations and a lot of ways to um, give respect to what they're doing as a contribution to your art is to, I don't know, subsidize and pay them what they're due, whether that's, whether that's exposure, whether that's monetary. Um, that's like like on a larger, like on a media scale or whatever scale, really. But I would like to say, and not to toot their horn, but I have always felt very comfortable with UCO, because I think UCO has always gone out of their way to bring an international community in, you know? Like, I have never, I have yet to see another university that puts the international community on the same scale as like the domestic students, you know?
Yeah.
Like I love that about UCO. Like it really does not feel like a it doesn't feel like a marketing ploy. It's
Right.
like it's second nature. To me at least. I don't know if many people feel the same way, but they're actively finding ways to have an international community and give importance to the international community, addressing issues that that community might face, from housing to, the only thing I don't like is out of state tuition and international fees. I hate that,
Yeah.
and I will actively talk about it because I do not understand it at all.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? But yeah,
Gotcha.
I will definitely say that that's a pitfall for sure.
Yeah. And you mentioned the example of a logo. I think I've also seen Twitter has its good and bad, sure, but there was this one tweet I saw sometime a while back. I think this was around that time of June, July. There was like a comparison. So, say some multinational companies, right?
Yeah.
Their logos in the US were changed to sort of fit the week of Pride or the month of Pride and that time of year. Whereas on this side, the same company's logo in, let's say, the Middle East is not the same. It's their generic logo. It's not the
Pride
branded
logo.
for Pride
Yeah.
logo or anything like that. Now, I guess again, there's arguments for both sides, I guess. But, or not that I guess, but there is an argument for both sides to some extent. Which one holds water more, I guess that depends. But
Hmm.
in a marketing sense, I guess you get it because those cultures are not necessarily open to all of this. So you don't want to sort of push them away from your brand, so to
Yeah.
speak. But then again, that's when you sort of start questioning, okay, then how much of this is actually something that you care about?
Yeah. Um, so my background is also in strategic communications.
Right.
That's a hybrid of public relations and advertising. And things like this are things that I've learned in college, are the things that my degree covers. Um, Cultural issues when tied to brands are typically like a difficult conversation to navigate
Yeah.
because it's like it's illegal to be like LGBT in the Middle East or in some parts of the Middle East. I can't really give like specific facts about that, but I just know it's not as accepted as it is in the US. And I think that's also kind of what Americans don't understand. It's like, in many ways, because it's hard to change a system that is so extreme from what it is here, you know? Which again, I think is why it's difficult for a lot of people to navigate cultural differences. Like they'll say like I don't understand why this happens in a different in these countries. I'm like, yeah, because there's so many like like I don't know, there's like prejudice that you cannot solve with a marketing campaign.
Hmm.
There's prejudice that cannot be fixed with a logo change. And so ultimately it stems from becoming a um it stems from becoming, especially in all of these different countries, like it stems from becoming an issue on representation to safety,
Hmm.
you know? And it's different again when it's in the US. In the US, you can literally like change your logo to whatever, and people are going to be like, oh, that's cool. Or people are always going to have something to say about it. Um, but yeah, it can be like a logo change is like quite easily the best analogy I have for that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's where sort of like this whole topic of representation becomes a little difficult, like you said.
yeah.
But it's a conversation that we need to have at the end of the day, because I think if we don't have that conversation, there is that lack of awareness and there is also that lack of understanding, because a marketing logo doesn't necessarily express nuance. It doesn't necessarily, tell you, oh, this is what it actually entails. It's just a picture. And a lot of the times, what you see in the picture is sort of based off of your own mental
Yeah.
framework, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
So, generally speaking, like, having a conversation just helps sort of bring that out, to like shine some light on it on a larger scale, depending on whatever scale it is.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I think in a lot of ways, um, people project their beliefs to be absolutes. which is where, like, in different levels too. Obviously, there's like a base level all the way to an extreme level, but like in a lot of ways, whenever people think of their beliefs as absolutes, it really pushes so many buttons. And I think whenever people are unable to have differing opinions and have conversations, and I think in the next like few weeks, I think I'm gonna marinate on what you said about like, unless I open the space for this conversation, like I'm probably not gonna want to have that conversation. And at the same time, if a person does not give me the space to have a safe conversation about certain things, then I will most likely not have a conversation about it, or I will feel threatened to have a conversation about it in terms of safety, you know, which is an unfortunate reality in America as well. But I think a lot of absolutes have to be like, I don't know, human rights. You know, it's like, I can easily say that, like, just be kind, be nice. I always say that, like, but from a, mind you, I can be very sassy about this because I do not ever see Asians as a minority. We are a group of people
Right.
that occupy a very large part of the world. A
Right.
very it's a very large faction of people.
For sure.
So it's like I've never looked at Asians as a minority. Maybe I don't even know, whatever. But
No,
like,
it's yeah.
you know what I mean? I've never
Yeah.
looked at Asians as a minority, period. Though that might be different from a context of like um power in the US. That's a whole different
Right.
conversation.
Yeah.
But again, it's like an absolute has to be like tolerating it's, I don't even know how to navigate this conversation, but it's like, you cannot be a racist. You cannot force your religious beliefs on people and use your religion as a basis of how you treat other people. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
there should be a general standard outside of those, because each human experience is so different. Each culture is so different. And again, we should be able to give people a space and give people like an opportunity to have that conversation. So
100%. 100%.
I get
And
so riled up whenever I talk about topics like this.
no, it's okay. It's okay. You're good. It's you're totally fine. It's all good. Um, I'm glad that we're having this conversation because I think to sort of put it this way, I think what we're saying is that we don't want these religions or cultures or whatever to be boiled down to their bare bones. We want them to be what they are, but at the same time, you sort of want to have that understanding of, okay, look, you might be this way, but I can be my way.
Yeah.
I can be the way that I want to be, and you can be the way you want to be, as long as we're not harming each other. Because if
Right.
and I think that's the sort of point of contention even with a lot of religion, right? Like a lot of things about religion, so to speak. I mean, I have my own personal thoughts, and that's a rabbit hole of its own. But um, in terms of understanding that we are going to be different, that's just how the cookie crumbles, if you will.
Yeah.
It's also a lot about accepting the fact, even though it's not necessarily what you want. So, yeah,
To
it's
me,
just,
it's
yeah,
like, if you actively go out of your way to cause people harm in whatever way,
right.
it's like, it first of all, it's a lot of effort. It is way more
Hmm.
effort to be that type of person as opposed to being like, I also don't like the idea of tolerance. Like, let's
Hmm.
not tolerate. Let's immerse ourselves in these conversations and in these cultures. And when I say cultures, I don't mean like Asian culture. I don't just mean Asian culture. I mean like
Yeah.
immersing yourselves in different communities outside of your own to understand like what are the issues that they face that make them bring up conversations that trigger you, you know? Because again, your experience, first of all, your experience as a college student, your experience as a person that moved to the United States, your experience as an Indian person, your experience completely is different, obviously different from mine. So I will never dictate what you should be doing to fit how I live or to fit what I think is correct,
Right.
you know? And so I think that's an issue that people kind of face in America or people face in general.
Right.
Like, I don't understand that.
Yeah, I get it. And I think a lot of it, like if you boil it down, I guess, is just hypocrisy, right? Because you want to live the way you
Yeah.
want to live, but you don't want me to live the way that I want, because
Yeah.
it just suits you, sort of thing. Um, and I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's a thing that's probably going to take a while to change. It's not something that's going to change overnight, but it's definitely a lot of it is definitely about being accepting and sort of understanding that your absolutes are not always right, and
Yeah.
other person's absolutes are not necessarily always wrong. For
Hmm.
their sort of frame of life, it might be right, like
Hmm.
this is a bad example. I don't know why this example popped up in my head, but why should I say it? Well, screw it, I'll say it. I'm
I
already
was
here.
gonna say you can cut it out if you.
No, it's okay. I don't mind saying it. I don't
Okay.
mind saying it. Yeah. It's sort of like some cultures, it's mandatory to get circumcised. Doesn't necessarily mean
Yeah.
that circumcision is like the right thing. It's your choice. Like,
Yeah.
sure. If that's what makes it healthier for you, sure, whatever.
Then do it.
Yeah, then do it. Right, exactly. I don't know why my brain brought that example up, but here we are.
No, that's really no. I mean, I get it completely. Um, I also don't think like conversations like that are taboo because,
Yeah.
um, I mean, it's a reality, you know, and I
Right.
completely agree. Ultimately, I think it's like it's if it's a personal choice that does not directly harm other people, who am I to tell you what to do?
Yeah.
Like on the issue of morality, people have such a skewed perception of morality because it's often tied to faith or not even faith, religion. Um, and so in situations like that, I like who are we to impose standards of faith to other people that don't participate in that like faith-based
Mm-hmm.
institution,
Right.
you know? And I think that's like an issue that people kind of don't see. It's like you have a choice. This is your choice to do whatever you want. Like, does it harm you because like people are so quick to call, people are so quick to cry wolf. Especially because it's so easy to do in America. But um like you have to ask the question of whether it harms you because I don't know, you want to participate in it, but like you will be like criticized
Mm-hmm.
or because it's like that's kind of the biggest like that's the biggest thing. Like people will often like not like people will call things out because they want to join, but they can't because they might be ostracized. But at the same time, it's like you have to really ask the question of why you think this directly harms you when it really doesn't.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to like it can, my god, that blurs the lines of like being very gaslighty.
Yeah.
But again, it's so quick to cry wolf in the US. Um and so some people just don't have like don't discern first, you know?
Mm-hmm. No, I understand. I understand what you're getting at. And it's sort of like going back to hurting people and so on and so forth. If you know, if you're aware that your intention is going to hurt or your intention is to hurt somebody, then I guess that's where you need to ask yourself some questions, right? Like,
Yeah,
because a lot of the times I think you can even unintentionally hurt somebody. Is that right or wrong? That's a different can of worms. But what I will say is that you can always grow out of that and you can always sort of learn, okay, I guess I shouldn't do that anymore. That wasn't my intention, but fair enough. I'm not going to do
yeah,
that anymore. I'm not going to hurt you anymore that way. But if you're stepping foot outside of the door to be like, okay, this is my intention, I am going to make sure that I hurt X, Y, and Z,
yeah,
then I guess that's where you have to sort of step back into the door and sort of ask yourself some questions, right? Um,
yeah. You have
of
to
like
like,
why you're actually doing this. So
yeah. It's like you have to understand systems of oppression, and it all again. One of the steps to getting there is to like participate, and at the same time, ooh, I have to really bring this up because I've I've just really come to terms with this in the last year. Whenever you want to participate in a conversation about systems of oppression involving a marginalized community, and I don't want to say a minority, but in a marginalized community, meaning in a community where there is direct harm, in a community that in a community that does not have the same rights that are available to you. Whenever you want to participate in that conversation, make sure that you're not narrating that conversation instead of listening to the people that are directly experiencing it. I will not
right.
speak of a person like in a conversation involving Black Lives Matter, for example. The most I can be is an advocate, is someone who supports that movement and supports the people that are harmed by that movement and give them a safe space or give them a space to feel safe, and to lead the conversations. And if I were to be a part of that conversation, maybe navigate that conversation the way, like, for example, the way that you and I are having this conversation right now. Instead of being like I said, you cannot narrate other people's experiences and call it your own. Like you have
Right.
to listen to the leaders in this community. You have to listen to the elders in this community, the younger generation that's currently moving that conversation, you know? And I think that's some part of the thing that people miss these days. Like
Yeah.
people don't get that. Like be a part of that community and listen. Sit and listen. Educate yourself. And then go from there. Tell your people,
Yeah.
tell your mom about it.
Yeah. 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 It's as simple. Common sense is not common anymore. Unfortunately, is like a saying that goes around a lot. But
No.
it's it's sort of understanding that. Look, I can't speak for how a Filipino person grew up in the Philippines because I did not grow up in the Philippines. I grew up in the Middle East and then I grew up in India. It's as simple as that, right? Like, I can't speak for the experiences of like somebody who's from, I don't know, Zimbabwe or South Africa.
Yeah.
You know, I can sure I can maybe open the space up, but I can't be like, oh, this is what happened. I know what happened because I read what happened and etc.
Yeah.
etc. Sure, I guess you can have a discussion about what you know, and maybe that having that discussion can also help sort of maybe break some of those mental shackles that you might have assumed that are
Yeah.
possibly not true. But at the same time, I think going back to the concept of space, right? You need to open that space up to where you're listening to what the actual people have to actually say.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Completely. Like
yeah,
that's how you educate yourself and that's how you like if you really want to be an advocate, that's what you do. You know? I agree completely.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. And to sort of, in terms, speaking of like conveying a message and all that sort of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
going back to what you do on a day-to-day basis, or like through your photo shoots and modeling and such, what do you want people to take away from what you do? That's a very loaded question, I
Oh,
guess, but
no, not at all. I really, again, I enjoy questions like that because it makes me think and it makes me open up a lot of different conversations.
mhm,
Um, uh, to preface, I when I did that photo shoot that I told you about involving like the Asian representation, to me, my intention again was to bring the Asian spotlight to again imagery of uh, what old Hollywood could have looked like with an Asian in the spotlight. Um, and as I posted them, I also had the intention of having a conversation about what masculinity is
mhm,
and where that falls, or what
mm,
that conversation looks like for me. And one of my, as I build, so whenever I walk into situations like this or into creative spaces, specifically for shoots, I'm typically the person that does my hair and makeup, the person that does styling. I will usually collaborate with creative direction, but I usually establish like the jumping off point and then I work with a team or work with a photographer I'm working with to bring that to fruition. But as I was going through or as I was posting about, honestly, whenever I post about shoots, I'm leery about what the Philippine audience would think or what
mm,
my what the Philippine audience would think, whether that's family or friends. And so I posted one of the images was my take on Marilyn Monroe's Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend look. It was the one where she's in hot pink and she's like dripping in diamonds and she's in hot pink. And then
mhm.
I was wearing something hot pink as well with like pink gloves and all that. And then I got a DM from someone in the Philippines who said, "Really? Hot pink?"
Mm,
And I said, "Yes, problem."
right.
um and I think about that a lot. Like I think about that a lot because it irked me so much. Because much as my culture has moved forward and much as again the younger generation working with experiences from the older generation and allies from the older generation try to change um, the narrative of what our lives are now and our mindset as the younger generation looks like, it's still very backwards in a lot of different ways. And so whenever I do these shoots, I make it a point to have those conversations without.
Oh, I dropped
Are
something.
you
My
okay?
bad. You're
Okay.
good. Go ahead. Sorry.
I
I
was like,
shouldn't
oh
have done
no.
that.
No, you're fine. But yeah, no, I mean, like, I make it a point to have those conversations without using words. Oftentimes in fashion, it's called an editorial because it aims to, be a piece that talks about um, a topic or an issue. Um, and with whatever I do, I choose to do that. I choose to blur the lines or see, it's sort of research,
Mm,
sort of see how people respond to gender norms
mm,
or images of or like cultural images, let's say, and so those are my intentions typically when I walk into spaces like that.
right.
uh, and I see that through interactions. I see that through the people that unfollow me, for example. I'm like, do these people feel uncomfortable seeing that imagery without having the conversation of what this imagery was about? And oftentimes I'm right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I know when someone unfollows me because of it.
Hmm. I guess from
So,
like a sense of you put up a certain picture that portrays something, and then you
yeah.
immediately see a certain kind of people just leave.
Yes.
Hmm.
And it's funny to me because it's like Instagram culture and social media culture too is so fascinating because we know that it's like, you know, it's all good on social media. Everything that you see on social media is so fabricated. It's meant for the gram, you know?
Right.
And so whenever someone unfollows me after I post something that can be striking or that's meant to bring a conversation or start a conversation about something, I know exactly why they do that.
Hmm.
I never take it personally. Social media
Yeah.
to me is a cloud.
Right.
I'm
Right.
like,
And
I
that's good.
value my
Yeah.
personal interactions very much. And it's oftentimes people that don't bother to start a conversation or to have a conversation anyway. So it's not a loss.
Yeah. 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 For sure. I totally agree with that because it's very easy to sort of get carried away by seeing the numbers drop. But then
hmm
you sort of understand that, okay, I guess that's just not my audience. And are they open to having that conversation or not? Again, that's a different thing.
Right. And that's exactly what it is. Like if they unfollow
Right.
you or if they react negatively, that to me shows that you're incapable of having that conversation and speaks more of where you are in your mindset and your understanding of the differences in people's lives and going back to absolutes and how people have absolutes, like that's kind of what that conversation is. And so it's like, if someone unfollows me because of that, I mean, that's like, sounds like you have like talk to your therapist about it. I'm like, you have
Hmm.
things you need to resolve. I'm sure. I'm not judging you. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah. That's that. Yeah, that's a fair argument to make because we all have to do some soul searching in that sense because it's very easy to be offended today. Um,
oh yeah. I mean, I will
so
personally on social media, I will track for engagement only for the purpose of knowing who my audience is. Because my Instagram has a commerce, like a business profile.
yeah,
So I can track exactly like um who my audience is, who's active, when they're most active, just because I want the people I work with to have as much recognition and as much exposure, you know?
yeah, for
So,
sure, for sure, for sure. Yeah. Um, to sort of maybe spin this off and make it a little more lighter in some ways. Um, from any of your shoots that you've
mhm.
done, were there some things that you were trying to convey, but people took it differently, like in a funny way?
Huh. Let me think. Oh, well, okay. Let me briefly brush through my feed and
Sure,
see.
sure. I mean, if not,
Are
that's fine. But it was just a thought that sort of popped up, and I thought to ask.
oh, bro. Yeah, no, I definitely have something. Um, aside from that one thing about the hot pink, the comment about the hot pink.
Hmm.
Um, so in Oklahoma, um, cannabis has become very much so normalized,
Right.
and um, I had well, I've worked with a lot of people in that industry, and it is very much an industry. Like, people need to understand that cannabis medicine and cannabis is used as medicine. First of all, it's something that grows in nature.
Right.
So, people just have perceptions of that. And again, we'll have conversations about morality and things of that nature. Um, but I had, I had, like, I don't I posted about like a shoot I did for a cannabis company, and I was so nervous. I was so nervous. I was so nervous because of like it's tied to the Philippine culture. It's
Right.
tied to like what would they think? Like, oh my god.
Right.
Like it's like it's so weird. It was just so weird to me. Just posting like the shoot I did for a cannabis company. I was like, I wonder. Also, this is the thing about me. I will post on Instagram and never on Facebook.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like those are two very extreme audiences. Some
Right.
of them exist on both platforms. Like I have people that on Facebook who also follow me on Instagram, but it's never like usually if it's like the older generation, they're never active on Instagram or I won't follow them back. Because
Hmm.
I know they're not gonna be active and I know they're snooping if they're there.
Yeah.
But yeah. That's really like it's just funny to me because it's like it's just polar it's different. Like the
Yeah.
conversation about cannabis in America, especially in Oklahoma, but in America and the Philippines. That was really it.
No, that's. I mean, there's a lot to it, right? In terms of,
Yeah.
again, it's just different, and sometimes I think, and sometimes it's really funny, but when you see people sort of react a certain way, but
Mhm.
it's like inherently, I guess, it's just the inability to sort of notice that there is a difference.
Surprisingly though, surprisingly, I didn't get negative feedback at all.
Oh, that's
I don't
good.
even yeah, but like I got more like off-putting. Well, I say
Hmm.
more. I had a few more off-putting like responses from the like masculine feminine conversation as opposed to cannabis.
Right.
But I think it was more of like an internal like personal insecurity to be like, oh no, oh no, is someone gonna tell us? It's like being a kid, you know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
the most illegal thing as a
Hmm.
kid is like maybe to me having candy after I brush my teeth at night or like having like a Coca-Cola.
Right.
Like that was the most like this is not allowed. And now that I'm an adult, it's like doing that triggered the same emotion
Hmm.
even if I knew it wasn't illegal.
Right.
Like that was the most like, oh no, is this allowed?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
really it.
No, that's fair because I think I guess it's also sort of like you don't want them to sort of assume that you're like a heavy cannabis consumer or whatever like that.
Yeah,
Like I think that also sort of inherently,
I
like maybe
know.
not that example specifically, but
Right.
yeah.
No, but I'm like, even if I was, I'm like, what are they gonna do about it?
Right. Right. Exactly.
Oh,
Exactly.
I just thought it was funny. I thought it was so funny. I was like, oh no. And then I got over myself and then it was fine. But yeah.
Fair enough. Fair point. One last question before we transition into like the last few questions of the podcast that are more generalistic, but um, we've maybe sort of touched on this briefly. But if there's anything else that you'd like to add to that sentiment, what is something that you'd like for people to take away from the work that you do?
This is gonna be very cliche, but that you can do whatever the hell you want to do.
Right.
Like, I want to speak like, well, to a variety of audiences, but especially to like my Asian friends, to like the Asian community, especially the younger Asian community.
Hmm.
Like, there is no ceiling. There is no ceiling to what we can achieve. There is no ceiling to success. Like, the limit does not exist, you know? Like, if you're missing a skill set to achieving something, um, and if you really feel driven to pursue something, then get education or acquire the skill set, you know?
Right.
Again, we've mentioned that our culture as an Asian culture thrives on being resourceful. And with everything that's available to us, use your resources to your advantage. That's really what I want people to take away from any work that I do. Compete with no one else but yourself. Like,
Right.
everything that I'm gonna say to answer that question is gonna be cliche because it's things that I remind myself of and things that help me become better in the things that I do, whether that's at my job, whether it's something creative that I'm pursuing. It's like almost like forget about your culture for a second.
Mm.
Take that away. Strip it all away and think of who you are as a person and what you have brought to the table before your culture. And maybe use that as an accent, as an accessory to how you are going to be different from others, or you are going to be different, how you're going to set your work apart, you know? But yeah, stay curious and learn from other people, be open to conversations like we've talked about, be open to
Right.
collaboration. Like, that's kind of what I want to get from people. Like, oh my God, people have so many perceptions of me, family and friends alike. People think that I will be a certain way, and then they meet me, and then it's like a completely different conversation. And it's like I really I don't know. It might be idealistic to say that, like, don't do the work for the fame or don't do the work for the likes. Do it because you want to do it. Do it because it's fun, because you love to do it. I often think of like my kid self and how my kid self would be very proud of who I have become.
Yeah.
Because it's like, again, you know, when you're a kid, you have, as an Asian kid, you have many, many limitations. People impose things on you and you become an adult. You become an adult in America and that changes things. So I kind of do my things in honor of the kid who knew that they could achieve and they could do all these things, but then they couldn't because people said they couldn't or you couldn't. But yeah, there is no ceiling. That ceiling does not exist. That ceiling does not exist.
Right. Unless you put it above yourself. So
Yeah,
yeah. That's a beautiful way to sort of close this section of the podcast. So thank you so much for sharing everything that you
for
did.
sure.
We're gonna head into like a word association game, which I call Bish Bash Bosh because it just sort of one day clicked in my head.
Okay.
So yeah, it's just sort of worked out. So basically, what it means is that I will give you one word,
Uh-huh.
and you have to respond to that one word in either 3 words or 3 phrases. So, for example, if I was
Oh,
to say fashion, what are the 3 things that sort of come to your mind? It can be anything. Like the
yeah.
first things that sort of call out to you as I say a word.
Okay. I love
Fashion's not the
this.
word.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, but
Are you gonna give
it's
me
just an
are you
example.
gonna give me a couple of words?
I'm gonna give you 5 words.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Cool,
it's
cool,
sort of
cool.
like a recurring segment I do on the podcast, and everybody whom I've spoken to so far is gets the same words, or everybody whom I'm going to speak
Right.
in the future to
Yeah.
speak to. Excuse me, because it's sort of a way to see how people respond to the same thing. Um,
Oh, are
but
you
yeah,
giving the same set of words to everybody?
yep, yeah,
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
yeah. So the first word is differences. Excuse me. What are the 3 things that sort of call out to you when I say the word differences?
Oh, oh. First thing that comes to mind is race
Hmm.
or racial differences. Um, dang. Huh. Uh, oh, different. on the word differences, it's going to be race. It's going to be opinion. And
Excuse me.
how do I? Because if I said no, race, opinion, and values.
Okay. What are the three things that come to your mind when I say the word nuance?
Race, opinion, and values. I'm just kidding.
No, fair enough. Fair enough.
No, I'm not gonna say that. Because I want it to be more nuanced.
Yeah.
But when you say nuance, I will say Prateek. You're making me really think about this. When you say nuance, I will say that it is valuable,
Mm-hmm.
that it is important, and that it is necessary
Okay.
as a general overarching
Right.
standard.
Right. The third word is learning.
Oh, endless. Does not exist in a classroom solely. And is also ageless.
Hmm.
Well, I want to add another one.
Go for it. Go for it, by all means.
Ageless and genderless. Like, that tells you enough. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there you can learn. You can learn. Period. That's it.
Fair point. The fourth word is empathy.
Oh my god. Ageless. Empathy. Lacking.
Mm-hmm.
Should be an absolute.
Mm-hmm.
And necessary. Completely necessary.
And the last word is similarities.
For similarities, it's closer than you might think it is. Like, when I say that, I mean, like, it's literally around the corner. Like, more common than you'd expect. And it's binding in a sense where it's like similarities will bring people together. Like, a similarity can be a struggle, and a struggle can bring people together. Similar can be a good experience too, and it brings people together. So, binding.
Beautiful, beautiful. That's a great way to close this segment off. Thank you so much for playing along. Two
For
more
sure.
questions. Well,
No
last one's
joke.
not really a question. But for those of you who can hear like a truck or something pulling up, I apologize. I have no
I've
control
had
over
many
it.
today, so I apologize too.
No, you're good. It's okay. It's okay. We have no control over it. So,
I know. I'm like, you probably heard a siren at one point because it's Oklahoma and it's a Saturday.
Right. I mean, it's all good. It's all good. But the second last question is, how do you relate to people? It's open to interpretation, however you interpret that question.
Well, I relate to people by walking into an interaction, getting over my first impression. Like, I often walk into a room sizing everyone up, because I'm that kind of person. And then I'll get over it. Like, I'll get over my perceptions of people and get out of my own way. And then I meet the people. I relate to people from a human perspective, or like in a human way, knowing that we all have, again, similar experiences, and we all have experiences that we will not all relate to. But I'm a talker. If this podcast shows you anything, it's that I can talk for prolonged amounts of time. Like, this is a blessing and a curse. And like, that is a tool that I use to relate to people. Um, you know, I like to think in a lot of different ways. I like to think that I spend as much time with people as they are spending with me. Like, this is a shared experience. Whether it's a mundane, like I'm at a grocery store and we just happen to, like start a conversation, whether it's that or this, or like family conversations or people you're in romantic relationships with. Yeah, like it's a shared experience. So, like, soak in that experience. That's how I relate to people.
Beautiful. And you've dropped a ton of these already in the recording so far, but the last question, which is not really a question, is leave us with a positive thought or a quote or anything that keeps you going every day.
It changes every day, or it changes a lot. I often, how like people have like a quote book or like a list of quotes. I have so much like self-diagnosed ADHD that I cannot keep up with that. So I will leave you with something that I have been marinating on for a while now, which is something that I have already actually said, which is there is no ceiling. Like there is no limit to what good you can do. If you want to run on an absolute, kindness is easily one of them. You know, but that's kind of where I am now, because I'm at a point where I'm like literally last night, as I was like walking around my house, like aimlessly walking, I have a lot of conversations with myself, and it's important to have conversations with yourself. And as I was having that moment, I was thinking like why did I ever allow people to tell me that I can only do that? Like, this is up to where I can, like, that's my limit to success in whatever way. And in many ways, I feel like that's why I have walked into a lot of different creative fields, and explored a lot of different creative fields, because I'm the type of person that whenever you tell me I can't do something, oh boy, like like that bores me so much. Like, really, you're telling me I can't do it? Watch me do it.
Right.
Like like, to boil it down to what it is, for now, currently, there is no ceiling. Like, forget about the ceiling. When you walk outside, it's the sky. Like, there's no ceiling. It's all in here. So get over yourself.
100%. Yeah, and for those of you listening, Mark just pointed to his brain,
Yeah.
if you will. But yeah, you create a ceiling yourself if there is one.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a beautiful way to close this off. I mean, we've gone for like close to 2 hours. It's been like an hour 45, but it's flown by. And
Yeah.
I'm glad that we've been able to have this conversation. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing everything, Mark.
Absolutely.
Yeah, before we let you go, if you could share anything, or not share anything, but like plug yourself, where can people find you? And I'll make sure to put this in the description as well.
Okay. Well, I mainly live on Instagram. Like, that is the primary platform. Oh my God, can you guys follow me on TikTok? I would love that. I am on Instagram, and I will like send you my links. But my Instagram handle is Maki MAKII.com_. And my TikTok is Maki.com spelled out. MAKIDOTCOM. That's my TikTok. I love TikTok and I love seeing other people's content. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
follow me on TikTok. I think that's really my plug. That's where I live. And if I have anything coming up that people want to see, like you'll know because I'll post about it on Instagram. If I have any other like links in the future. So, but
Got
yeah,
it. Got it. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Mark. And for
for
those of you
sure.
listening and
Thanks for
watching,
having
thank
me.
you. Yeah, for sure. Not a problem. And for those of you listening and watching, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Perspective Platoon with Prateek featuring Marc Adrian. Make sure to mention in the comment section below some things that you found interesting, intriguing, or relatable about this conversation. Make sure to also check the description box below for other sources of information and content that we've talked about today. Like this video, share it around, and subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to never miss another episode. And thank you once again for being a part of all of these conversations that I've been having with a wide range of people over the past 10 months or so. I've had a few ups and downs in terms of being able to upload them all in time, but I'm doing my best to keep my promise of making 52 episodes this year, and I'm really thankful for all of you who join in on all of these conversations. And I'm very hopeful of continuing this even after I reach episode number 52. So thank you so much for just being a part of the journey. I know I'm making this a little rambly, but it's just something that I'm sharing from the heart, and I'd just love to put that out there. So until next time, stay safe, take care, and don't forget to keep your mind open to different perspectives, because you never know, random relatability might just be around the corner.